Every time. Every time. Welcome to episode 77 of the Civil War Breakfast Club podcast. Joined as always by my co-host Mary, a woman who learned her Cleveland Indians were mathematically eliminated from the playoffs the day the MLB lockout ended. I am merely a faded baseball bag named Darren. How are you, Mary? How are you doing?
I'm great. And I believe they changed their name to Guardians now. And yeah, I'm still not over that 2016 World Series, which I still will call forever the great halt of baseball.
Oh, the rain delay that doomed you and benefited the Chicago.
The great halt.
So what's going on? How are things?
Good. Finally got some spring weather here in Southwestern Ontario. So yeah, it's going pretty good. And heading south, well, not really south. I guess I'm heading east this weekend to
Southeast, probably, huh?
The lovely town of Plymouth, Massachusetts. So looking forward to that.
Well, we got a fun, action-packed episode tonight. But before we get started, the question I always ask you, of course, is what are you drinking tonight, Mary?
I'm drinking Down in Moxie by Great Lakes Brewery out of Toronto, and I don't have a Dan Sickles mug, so there I've just hinted what we're doing tonight. I'm drinking out of my General Meade mug, which is funny. That's kind of the big rivalry for Uncle Dan there. But as much as I say I'm Team Meade, I can also say that I am Team Sickles. So
divided loyalties.
I believe you can be both.
Okay. Well, since you didn't ask, I am drinking called Splintered Sunlight IPA, which is just a basic IPA. And of course, I didn't have a Sickles mug myself, so I'm drinking out of the company mug, the Civil War Breakfast Club mug. So, Mary, in any case, we're going to talk about Gettysburg tonight. We haven't talked about Gettysburg in a while, and there are three things that you can never do while sitting at the mine in Gettysburg. You know what they are?
You can never. First Corps broke first.
First Corps broke first. You cannot shake Bill Fresnito's hand. And the third thing is you cannot say anything positive about Dan Sickles. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take one of those three tonight, and we're going to see about that. So we are going to be joined by our special guest tonight, our friend Jim Hessler from the Gettysburg. He's a Gettysburg licensed battlefield guide. He's the co-host of the fantastic Battle of Gettysburg podcast, as well as the author of the books Gettysburg Peach Orchard, Pickett's Charge at Gettysburg, and this one, Sickles at Gettysburg, which I've read many times. So when you want to discuss all things Uncle Dan, Jim certainly has more than just one leg to stand on. See what I did there?
Yes, very clever.
Hey, Jim, how are we doing?
Welcome to Civil War Breakfast Club podcast.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here. You brought back Reliance Mine memories. It was at the mine one time where two drunks at the bar accosted me and said that I should have been shot and then hanged for treason, for disobeying Meade's orders. Like, not Sickles should have been, but I should have been. So, the Reliance Mine just brings back so many happy Dan Sickles memories for me.
God.
So,
well, we have some happy memories ourselves. Mary remembers almost all of them, so it's pretty cool. Mine's certainly a fun place to go. But so obviously tonight we're going to talk Dan Sickles, and arguably that Union general who brings out, just like you said, probably the most emotion out of any general at Gettysburg, and not talking about the emotions that Oliver Otis Howard brings out of Mary. We're talking about different types of emotions here, right? So just a mention of Sickles' name seems to rile up the masses and for those who study the battle, right? And so, he disobeyed direct orders, and he was a disaster, and his actions at Gettysburg were a fiasco. And my personal favorite is he was a scoundrel.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So the question is, were they though? Right. And we're going to talk tonight about maybe some of the lead up and the early part of that Battle of Gettysburg to determine if that historical memory is really accurate. And obviously, Jim, you are the guru for all things Sickles. So we figured you were the obvious person to have on with us.
Yeah. One thing I want to ask you, Jim, is why Sickles for writing these books about him and studying him like you do?
Yeah, no, that's a great opening question. And, people assume, oh my God, you must be a Sickles fan. When people found out I was writing the Sickles at Gettysburg book, the number one question that I would get from people is, whose side are you going to be on? And I'd be like, well, as a historian, I'm not supposed to be on anybody's side. They go, well, you better not take down General Meade, or I'm going to be, I did not have any real background as a Sickles enthusiast or somebody who was even all that interested in him. When I became a licensed battlefield guide in 2003, I just sort of stumbled into the fact that I liked telling Sickles stories. And you can get through the battle and putting troops over here in this regiment and this brigade over there kind of thing. But very often when the non-battle person was kind of dozing off in the back seat, you could say, you know, and this guy shot his wife's lover. And, you know, they immediately perk up and say, tell me more about that.
Mm-hmm.
And that statue over there should have been a Sickles statue, but he embezzled money. Tell me more about that. Just, you know, and it's just, I found that I enjoyed telling the Sickles stories, but the books that were out there at the time didn't really do it for me. So I started deep diving and researching. One thing led to another, and here we are tonight talking about him.
Nice.
Well, he had it all. The off the course stuff he talked about. He was a, womanizer. He was arrogant. Probably a Yankees fan. He had all the bad traits, right?
Your guest is a Yankees fan.
I did my homework, Jim. I know that. But in case, but you know what though? The other thing about him was he was brilliant. He was very well appreciated by his own troops. The general in command of his 3rd Brigade in Birney's division, Philippe Brigitte Denis de Carandin de Trobriand, he says of Sickles, he was a gifted with high degree that is multiplicity of faculties, which has given rise to saying that a Yankee is ready for everything and obstacles do not discourage him. So you can always tell by what the people who work for him think. You want to know how a guy is, ask his employees how they are.
Right. How do you treat the people under you?
Right.
Yeah.
Now, to say his background is colorful, certainly, and that's what makes him very intriguing. I mean, you can study Sickles, or you can study Sedgwick or Slocum. Who are you going to pick if you're someone who's looking for just a understanding of a colorful Civil War guy? But I think when we study his activity at Gettysburg, it's important to look at what he was dealing with and what he was presented with in that situation. He's the only Corps commander of the 7 who's not from West Point. He's a political general, right? He was a guy going back to his own history. He went to NYU and he passed the bar. He was a lawyer of all things. So right off the bat, he's going to talk his way out of a situation, which he's good at. 1852, he's 32 years old. He marries a 15-year-old named Teresa Badgley. And of course, as you hinted with, he famously shot and killed her lover, Philip Barton Key, at Lafayette Square, Washington. And he's that first case of temporary insanity that is successfully tried in American jurisprudence by Edwin Stanton. So he's very famous at that point. And so going into the war, he's certainly somebody who I think is already in that public mainstream.
Yeah, all of the above, right? And when I first started coming to Gettysburg, probably the early 1990s, as I said, I became a battlefield guide in 2003, but roughly for the first 15 years or so, the interpretation that I often heard or stumbled upon in the park usually was along the lines of what you just said, Darren. Sickles was an idiot. Only an idiot would violate the fishhook and move out of position and things like that. And something that just didn't ring true to me was the guy's resume. The fact that he is a diplomat, politician, attorney, all of those things. Now, I always say about Sickles to be fair and unbalanced, or fair and balanced. I guess we can be unbalanced when we're talking about Sickles. But I mean, to be fair and balanced about Sickles, he's one of those guys who often starts well and then maybe ends badly, and then he kind of goes on to the next thing. But I think the de Trobriand comment about obstacles do not stop him is spot on. And one of the things that I did always admire about Sickles was that you see this a couple times during his life when he seems to be down and out, he picks himself up, he dusts himself off, and he goes on to the next thing. And you can't say that about many people. You certainly couldn't say that about anybody who was really an idiot. And if the guy was an idiot, he would not have half the resume that he did. So there's got to be something there that his contemporaries saw that all of the people today who hate him so enthusiastically are missing.
Well, anybody who's read his papers knows how brilliant this guy actually is. I mean, this is not somebody who, fell off the turnip truck here. He's somebody who legitimately would have been a genius on almost anything he tried. He came from a successful, rich family. But again, he's someone who, he's very patriotic. And I think Mary and I were talking earlier, but you can say a lot of things about Sickles. The thing you cannot say is that he could not make a decision. whether it was right or wrong, he could make a decision. And sometimes it was not the best decision, but certainly it was one that he stuck with. But the problem with him is, we'll talk about, is that he never assumed any fault with anything, right? Nothing was ever wrong.
Yeah.
And so we'll get into that later on, but he's going to raise his own brigade in New York City, and it's not recognized by the governor, Edwin Morgan. It's a situation where his friendship, even though he's a Democrat with Abraham Lincoln, is one that's going to help forge that brigade. So it's going to be recognized as a brigade, even though New York doesn't. So he ends up raising that brigade. But as we look forward towards Gettysburg, he falls into that clique there with Butterfield and Hooker and all those people, and he's automatically against Meade right off the bat because their personalities just don't click.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I go into this a lot in my work. One of the things that interested me when I was first getting into the topic was I wanted to understand what were the real causes of any schisms between Sickles and Meade. Because again, the standard shallow interpretation is always Sickles was an amateur, Meade was a professional, and that set them apart. And that's, again, the soundbite version of history that you always see on it. One of the things I went into this in the Sickles book, when I was particularly doing research on supporting players like David Birney, who was one of Sickles's division commanders. I came to an appreciation that I think really a lot of the Meade-Sickles issues started probably about at the time of the Battle of Fredericksburg. So we're talking late 1862. And Meade and Birney got into a dispute over whether or not Birney had adequately supported Meade during Meade's breakthrough at Fredericksburg. I mean, it's a great story. I love Fredericksburg. But they get into this personality dispute. Birney then is moving into sort of the Third Corps clique, which includes Sickles, and then is including Joe Hooker and Dan Butterfield. And one of the great comical, almost hilarious things that you see during that early winter of 1863 is this social circuit that Hooker and his boys are establishing at Army headquarters. All the generals are partying and they're drinking and they're going to balls and galas and weddings, and they're saying stuff like, where are we getting all these women from? Somehow they're finding all these women in camp. And then you have George Meade writing home to his wife saying things like, well, everyone was invited except me. I was the only general in camp who was not. I mean, it's sad. I can see Mary Condon.
He's a Philadelphia guy. No one likes him.
Yeah, well, yeah, nobody likes Philly guys. Well, problem being too, Bernie was a
Philly guy too.
But I always kind of liken it to almost like the cool kids at the cafeteria. There's the party clique, and then there's the engineers, Meade, Andrew Humphreys, Gouverneur Warren. There's guys like that. They're probably sitting at the lunch table, studying and reading their books, while Sickles and Hooker are getting all the women in that. So yeah, late 1862, early 1863, you sort of see the two of these guys going off on these very divergent paths, which of course is going to explode on July 2nd at Gettysburg.
Mm-hmm. I think the other thing that factors into it too is the political general aspect. The political generals have to fight a little bit harder to make themselves respected and recognized. Black Jack Logan, political general, he's decent. Yeah. Mm-hmm. He's a little bit of a loose cannon, which is, I think, why Sherman doesn't put him in command after McPherson gets killed at the Battle of Atlanta, which works out for O.O. Howard. I mean, there's my first Howard reference.
Gratuitous reference.
But
will be that name.
He's certainly not like Franz Sigel is probably one of the worst political generals out there, And I know, like, it was when Sickles got command of the Corps, Howard's like writing to Washington being like, okay, he got command over me. What the heck is going on with that? Howard's probably pulling that. I'm from West Point and you gave this political general. So then that's when Howard ends up getting the 11th Corps. But I think that being a political general, somehow that's kind of a strike against him in somebody like the eyes of Meade as well.
Oh yeah, I think there's no doubt about that. And Sickles, you're absolutely right. And Sickles never did live down the Philip Barton Key murder. I mean, there were people in the Army that were still mocking him over that. So you have you have a potentially shady background. I mean, hey, you were part of a noteworthy murder. You don't see that in the Army very often. You have that. You have the political appointment versus the West Pointers and that sort of thing. And then you have the personality differences between not only Sickles and Meade, but Sickles and his boys versus Meade and his boys. And I think if I've got them all, that's probably the three factors that come together. But like I said, too often in Gettysburg, we just make it amateur general versus West Pointer. Well, West Point didn't guarantee battlefield victories. And you mentioned Logan, not going to West Point didn't necessarily make you a loser. It was the kind of army where you could learn on the fly, you could learn on the job, you could rise to the level of your abilities. And I think where Sickles ultimately falls short, I've always said this, sort of that era when he goes from brigade to division and then eventually commanding a corps at Chancellorsville, I don't think he gets enough experience. It's kind of like one big battle and he's not there, but Hooker gets promoted, so let's give Sickles a division. And then he's in reserve at Fredericksburg, but Hooker gets promoted again, so let's give Sickles a corps. And he doesn't get the on-the-job training, which I think would have been more crucial than necessarily a West Point education. Mm-hmm. Not that I'm dismissing the West Point aspect of it.
No, I think you're right about that for sure. That
but he gets too good.
Hold on before we go on. That's our first boot of the night. I'm trying to do my Canadian accent here. Tonight's episode is about Dan Sickles. Okay, I'm sorry, Darren. Carry on. I just had to get that.
I was going to say.
I was waiting for that.
I'm immune to it. I'm immune to it at this point. It goes around my head now. So thanks for picking it up. I just it's like you live by the ocean, you don't smell the sea anymore. Same deal. But I mean, Sickles, they give him two really good division guys, and David Balburney and Andrew Humphreys. He's got a really good artillery guy in George Randolph. Yeah. And he also, his aide, Henry Tremaine, he's going to get a Medal of Honor at Resaca. So he's got a good group around him. So, say what you will about Sickles' lack of experience, he's going to get some good people. So, as Gettysburg goes on to kind of phase into Gettysburg, Meade's going to send that left wing, the 1st, the 3rd, and the 11th into Gettysburg, and, along with John Buford, of course. And they're going to do that reconnaissance and force thing. And this is where it's interesting when you read, and this really depends on who you read about Gettysburg, about what the intention was, right? You could read the Gelso theory about how he did it on his own. You could read Ken Masterson Brown talking about the reconnaissance and force with, the Dennis Mahan thing and the Clausewitz theory. Mm-hmm. But whatever it is, they're going to be sent into Gettysburg and they're going to be going to do that with the concept, if you're going to follow that reconnaissance plan, they're going to go to Gettysburg and they're going to fall back to a big Pipe Creek line. And that again, that's debated. That's what's great about Gettysburg is you can debate this stuff forever about what the ultimate plan was. But Sickles, despite being a corps commander, he's going to ultimately end up reporting to Reynolds on his left wing. So he has to serve two masters right off the bat. Exactly. He's going to serve Meade and he's going to serve Reynolds. And this is going to be the first of the confusing of Dan Sickles' concept in the Gettysburg campaign, right? So, Meade wants him to move to Emmitsburg, Maryland, because he's afraid of that left wing because it's vulnerable. And you've got Reynolds who is telling Sickles he wants him to move ahead to Taneytown. And so it's interesting because this is when Howard gets involved too, because Howard is kind of along with Reynolds saying, move up and support him. So if you think of your Dan Sickles, what do you do? And I think he astutely does both, right? He brings 4 brigades with him, leaves 2 back in Emmitsburg. So right off the bat, he's like, well, I think I know what I'm doing with this. I'm going to try to serve 2 masters. But then Reynolds, he sends him that ambiguous quote, you better come up. So if you're him, how do you handle that? And so I think right at the beginning, it's like when you're at the beginning of a job and at the beginning, you're kind of confused what you're doing. It sets that plan for the rest of the campaign. I just think Sickles never shakes it.
Yeah, I think, we covered a lot there going from when Reynolds is placed in wing command up through the 30th and then up through July 1st. One of the things I think about Sickles that is counter to the way historians have always looked at Sickles at Gettysburg is, and I've heard colleagues say this, I've heard colleagues or Rangers or other folks interpret this on the field. Basically, and I heard somebody say to the effect once, Sickles told Meade to go to hell, because Sickles was the hot dog. He wanted to destroy the army. He was just going to do whatever Dan Sickles wanted to do, kind of thing. I think if you look at it, and you understand and appreciate the transition from Hooker to Meade. Hooker, Sickles' buddy. Sickles is very in at headquarters under Hooker. Meade, not a Sickles buddy. Sickles is very out at headquarters under Meade. I think what you actually have going on with Sickles at Gettysburg is, rather than overconfidence, I think Sickles is actually struggling with his confidence. And I think so. What you have, some of the examples you cited, what you have is literally serving two masters. Sometimes he's getting a dispatch from Meade. Sometimes he's getting a dispatch from Reynolds. He's like, I'm not sure which one I should do. And I think what he does do on July 1st is relatively prudent. As you said, ultimately, he does more or less come to the sound of the guns, although he agonizes over it for a couple of hours because of this uncertainty, which, as you guys know, leaves O.O. Howard kind of hanging on the battlefield there, waiting for Sickles or Slocum to come up.
Yeah, he's up in the Fawnestock house, right?
Yeah, and Howard's waiting for somebody to come up. But it's this idea, I think, that Sickles is not overconfident. He's getting conflicting orders from guys that he knows are not part of his crowd, and he's not really sure how to handle it. I do think it slows him down. I do think it impacts what he does a little bit on July 1st. But ultimately, he does come up with a pretty prudent and rational decision, as we said, to leave some troops behind at Emmitsburg, such that when Meade finds out Sickles has come to Gettysburg, Meade sends Sickles basically a message, I don't want you to leave Emmitsburg. Well, Sickles had already left Emmitsburg, but he'd left some troops behind. And again, that's sort of and again, Sickles haters will say, oh, well, what he did on July 1st isn't that bad. So it's like, okay, 24 hours later, I can't stand the son of a bitch. He's crazy and trying to destroy the army. But on July 1st, he's not so bad, kind of thing. And that's why you have to look at these people as a continuum. They're good, they're bad, they have their good moments and their bad moments.
Yeah, he's got to make that real-time decision how to deal with it. He knows he wants to go to Gettysburg. He knows Reynolds is heading up there. He knows Howard's heading up there. He's part of that left wing, but he knows he's the big boss, so he thinks probably doesn't like him, wants him to hold Emmitsburg. So he tries to get to both. He does get there quick. He beats Slocum and the rest. There's that story where he gets to Gettysburg and he runs into Howard, right? And Howard has that quote where according to Tremaine, he says, "Here you are, General, always reliable and always first." That's what Howard says.
Okay. Is Howard enthusiast? Do we buy that quote? What do you guys?
I do. Yeah, no. Howard is. He talked, as we're going to talk about in a little while. Howard does speak highly of Uncle Dan for sure, and I mean, Howard's in this position too, where he's coming off this post-Chancellorsville, where he's got this bad reputation. He's up in the Fawnestock house, and someone comes up and is like, Reynolds is wounded. And he's like, okay. And then the next thing is Reynolds is dead and you're in charge. And he's like, oh.
Yeah, not to get way off topic, but last weekend at the Seminary Ridge Museum, I just did a whole talk on all of this first day stuff and the command friction going on with Meade and Reynolds and Howard and Sickles and all of that stuff. Howard's in a tough spot. And as I said, ultimately, he's waiting, hoping, assuming he will get reinforced by both Sickles and Slocum. And ultimately, as we know, it doesn't happen until it's really too late for him on July 1st.
Yeah, and they don't get there till very late in the evening.
And that's foreshadowing when Sickles is sitting at the peach orchard wondering when his support's going to be coming. That never really comes either. So we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But it's interesting, that quote, that Howard quote, he repeated that the rest of his life. Always first. And, he loved that quote. And, we're not going to talk too much about the post stuff with him and Longstreet and the drinking and all of the stories with that. But that's the case of it. So, eventually, to your point, Meade does eventually order those last two brigades forward. This is part of that big mad rush now to Gettysburg, right? As everything kind of goes on. So, That plan obviously changes for Meade. Pipe Creek plan definitely is not going to last as they're all heading up there. Howard, speaking of Howard, we're thinking about him now. He's going to take Buford and extend that left line, put them down the Emmitsburg Road to kind of extend the line, protect that flank. But when they get there, his Sickles is going to be kind of told by Slocum, who is going to be the commanding officer at the time, while Hancock is going back with him, to mass on Cemetery Ridge. And this is when it gets kind of confusing with where he's supposed to go. And this is when John Geary shows up with his 12th, right? And we talk about things like what the word position means, which is what the word bivouac means, and all the things that kind of get carried on with this, specifically about where they ultimately got. Talk about the Samuel R. Johnson story, all that stuff we'll talk about. Right. But the reality is where ultimately they were placed is going to kind of tell the story for probably the next 12 hours once they get there, where they're supposed to go.
Yeah, well, a couple thoughts there. First of all, for our Hancock listeners in the audience, we got to give Hancock a shout out, because it is Hancock, I think, who realizes, okay, Gettysburg is a good position, but can be easily turned. And that's why some 12th Corps troops ultimately, and some of the Iron Brigade, end up over at Culp's Hill. But Geary's guys, the night of July 1st, morning of July 2nd, end up, quote unquote, down by a range of hills south of town. And I think that's important for Monday morning quarterbacks to remember. Most of these guys have never been to Gettysburg before, and nobody is saying you go to Little Round Top, you go to Big Round Top, you go to Devil's Den kind of thing. It's a vague, go to that range of hills south of town. But anyways, while Geary is basically going out there, Sickles in the 3rd Corps is arriving on the field during the evening hours, and Sickles's troops up through Humphreys' division are really still filing onto the field well past midnight. So a lot of times I hear people say, well, Meade puts Sickles on the left flank because he didn't expect any action there. No, he didn't. That's kind of the marching orders, and that's where Sickles goes in, and he files in on Cemetery Ridge. It's going to be then the morning of the 2nd. I don't want to get too far ahead, but it's going to be the morning of the 2nd then, or sometime after midnight, which qualifies as the morning, but sometime after midnight when Meade arrives up on Cemetery Hill. Sickles is there. Howard is there. Sickles and Howard have had a nice meal with Elizabeth Thorne in the gatehouse, so they're probably feeling good about that. But Meade arrives at some point during those morning hours, gives Sickles verbal instructions, verbal orders, which have become the heart of so much controversy.
Well, that's where it brings up the William Payne story and the Payne map story, right? Yeah. So you figure, and this is one of those debated things. And that's what's, like we said, what's great about this is whether it's true or not, it's one of the stories you got to talk about it. So figure between 2 and 4 in the morning, so you're talking early hours, that early dawn time of July 2nd. William Payne is going to go out with Meade, and they're going to reconnoiter the field. And he is going to draw a map that is again debated whether or not it's authentic. But if you look at it, and it depends on who you talk to, okay, it does tell, if you believe in it, where Meade intended his corps to go. And if you look at the map, for one, it's very realistic as far as the terrain. It's got a couple of things wrong. It's got Longstreet in the middle, which he wasn't there yet, so he had Confederate positions. But it does show the roads. It does show the elevations, because they were going with the Adams County map is all they had coming in. So you have those elevations. And if you look at the map, where Sickles' corps is supposed to be placed is between the Heights, Little Round Top, and the Emmitsburg Road. And then you've got supposed to be the 6th Corps to their left, which is going to change. So if you're looking at that map, and if you do believe that was the instructions that Meade gave to his corps commanders around 5 o'clock in the morning on that 2nd, you can see where the confusion with Sickles is going to plug in if you believe the map.
Yeah, and if you put a gun to my head and made me choose, I would probably not believe the existing Payne map. The Payne map clearly existed at the time. The reconnaissance with Payne and Meade and all those other guys clearly happened. If you put a gun to my head, and it forced me to choose. I think the existing Payne map, which has been reprinted in Gettysburg magazine and some other places over the years, I think New York Historical Society might be where it currently is. But anyways, I think the one that's used today is, in my opinion, probably a post-war invention. But, there's some smart people like Chuck Teague and that who would disagree with me on that. As you say, it's one of those debatable things. I think, though, the thing is, as far as the confusion, if you go into how Meade describes the orders to Sickles. Now, I'm a big Kent Masterson Brown fan. Kent and I are friends. He called my Sickles book splendid in Meade at Gettysburg, and then he took a little bit of a shot at one of my conclusions. I think his Meade at Gettysburg is a seminal work on it. I'm going to take a little bit of a shot, though, at one of his conclusions, because he sort of portrays it as Meade grabbing Sickles by the arm, pointing to Little Round Top and saying, I want your troops placed on that summit. That is, in my opinion, a liberal interpretation of the historical record. How Meade described his orders to Sickles, I think, is best represented by how Meade described it during his sworn testimony in 1864 for the Committee on the Conduct of the War. And I won't go into those orders yet because I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves here. So I'll pause.
Right. So again, this brings up that nebulous area, that gray area, right? So, so at the end of the day, they're going to end up trying to place these guys. Now, whether or not Geary's 12th, whether they got it wasn't called Little Round Top then, but that the hill there, whether it was Patterson, Swisher Hill, whether it was wherever it was probably west of Tawnytown Road, but wherever it was, there's question about where they were supposed to go, right? And and what else does not get a lot of discussion at this point about Meade is his mindset, because you mentioned the 1864 conduct of war thing, and he talks a lot about how a lot of his intention was he didn't know if he was going to be offensive or defensive at Gettysburg at this point, and that is a huge factor as we look at the placement of where Sickles ultimately goes at the Peach Orchard, because if you're firing an offensive attack. And we're going to talk about that because there's that report where he said he was going to, we'll jump ahead to his war conference that he has, on the second later. But if you're going to launch an offensive attack, you're going to launch it from the left side. It's going to be from the Peach Orchard. And we'll talk about that. So if you're not sure if you're going offensive or defensive and you're getting wishy-washy messages and you're already coming into the town kind of unsure of what's going on, it put you in a tough spot. And there's no question that all this stuff is playing on Sickles' mind, even though he never admits it. And that's the problem.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things playing on Sickles' mind. Obviously, there's the Chancellorsville effect. People will always point to Hazel Grove at Chancellorsville. Sickles is trying to avoid Hazel Grove. For anybody who doesn't know who's listening, at Chancellorsville, Sickles was in a salient position called Hazel Grove. He obeyed Hooker's orders. He pulled out of Hazel Grove. Confederate artillery came in after him, basically pounded the Union line out of position. Everyone always assumes Sickles is trying to avoid a repeat of Hazel Grove. It makes sense. That was a horrific experience for the Army of the Potomac. It was only roughly 2 months to the day earlier. Problem with Hazel Grove is Sickles, we've never found an account from Sickles. We found it from others, but we've never found an account from Sickles where he says Hazel Grove is what caused me to do what I did. Chancellorsville is playing on Sickles' mind in what he often talks about. And remember, folks, the guy lives for another 50 years. He gives a lot of interviews, speeches, all that stuff. What he always says when he talks about Chancellorsville is the idea of basically not being another Howard, being on the flank, having the enemy come pouncing out of the woods on me. I wanted to get out of the hole I was in and get out towards the commanding ground. That's one thing that's playing on him. We talked about him being on the outs with headquarters. That's two things playing on him. Last but not least, and I want to pause here because I want to make sure no one watching or listening thinks we're making excuses for Sickles. I'll be happy to render what I think my final judgment is on Sickles at the end of this. But to the point of, Darren, you used the word making it understandable. Is it understandable? Today, we are conditioned to think of Meade's line at Gettysburg as that fishhook. And I see this so often on social media. Sickles, the idiot, violated the interior lines of the fishhook. Folks, I'm not aware of any point in the battle where anybody said, rally around the fishhook, boys. That is a post-battle invention. The earliest references I've seen to it refer to as a horseshoe. Point being, and I'll start ranting here. I'll forget what my point is. No, the point being, if you get on the ground, you haven't been there before, you don't have aerial maps, you don't know about the fishhook, there's no Hancock Avenue to kind of guide you from here to there kind of thing. It's not as readily apparent that you should be in that straight line. Now, we'll still come back to Meade's orders to kind of qualify that. But I think confusion with all of these factors, a fraction of which we only talked about, is confusion is, in my opinion, understandable. Disagree with me, disagree with Darren, disagree with Mary. I think it's understandable.
You can even make an argument that the fishhook didn't even exist at the beginning of that July 2nd.
No,
it was when they say,
right.
I mean, the impression was they had this firm fishhook set up from Culp's Hill all the way down. They don't realize that again, go back to that Payne map. If you're going to believe that, the end of the Union line is anchored near Emmitsburg Road.
Right.
It's not anchored on a little round top. So if you're it's depending on how you follow it, the fishhook's not really a thing until the end of the second anyway, when they get pushed back anyway. Yeah. And so the impression is they had this firm line, elbow to elbow, right? Exactly. And then he just said, YOLO, I'm going for it. The hell of it. I'm going for it. Exactly. And I think that's the problem. Sorry to interrupt you, Mary. I know you're going to say something.
No worries. I was going to say, the whole Howard being in his head, I think is definitely the case, because Howard in his memoirs does defend Sickles with what he does. He said, Sickles' position was questioned. It was outside of the natural line from Ziegler's Grove to the Round Tops. But as there was no cavalry there and no masses of other troops to protect his left, it was fortunate circumstances that Sickles had pushed out as he did, simply that it gained time for General Meade and secured Round Tops against capture. So Howard is, he's thrown a little bit of shade at Hooker there, I think, for, basically like, well, remember what happened to me. But I think that, Howard is looking at what happens to Sickles after, how his reputation, like how he's blamed for this, and thinking, okay, I understand what this guy is going through, and I'm going to say, I know why he did what he did. Because a lot of times when people would support Sickles in the post-war years, critics will say, oh, they're being influenced by Sickles's whiskey and his cigars and his hookers and all of that stuff. Folks, would Oliver Howard be influenced by any of that stuff? I rest my case. No, I don't think he would. I think he definitely looked at what happened and was like, yeah, this is what he's trying to do with this.
Yeah, I mean, and just look how it goes on. So the night of the 1st of July 1st, you've got Meade telling Sedgwick, I intend to make a vigorous attack on the enemy. So he's telling other corps commanders that he's still thinking offense. He's going to tell Halleck and Washington he will attack if he thinks he has a reasonable chance of success. So the night of the 1st, he's thinking he's given the incentive, the images there that he's going to be doing on offense. So then when it turns into the 2nd is when everything kind of gets messed up. So early in the morning, you've got, Captain George Meade, the son of, right? Yeah. He's going to go check on that Sickles position to find, and he's going to let him know a couple of things. One, where General Meade's headquarters is located, because you got to know where that is. And he also wants to find out if Sickles guys are in position. Now, again, this position, he means ready to go, ready to fight, versus, sitting there in camp, which they were. As a matter of fact, when Captain Meade got there, Sickles is sleeping. He's still in bed when he gets there. So he wakes up with, his pillow head, his bed head there, was trouble gets out of bed. And so he wants to know roughly where he's supposed to go. George Randolph, he's going to go to Henry Hunt and ask him for his opinion on where he should help place the artillery, right? And so when General Meade gets Sickles' message from his son saying, hey, where am I supposed to be? He says, what my general reviews were intimidated to what was to occupy the position that I understood General Hancock had placed General Geary the night before.
Right.
And that brings up the question of, and people take that quote to think Sickles didn't know where Geary was.
Right.
Of course he knew where Geary was. He absolutely knew where Geary was, but he's not in position. And so, it just goes to show again, it just goes to show the mindset of where they were at the time, where everything is kind of moving around. And a lot of it's that semantical talk, right?
Yeah.
I want you to go where Geary's men were in position. Well, I didn't see them in position. That doesn't mean I didn't see him. It just means I didn't see him in position. They're in camp. They're hanging out. So he wants to know, where am I supposed to go where Geary's men were positioned? He didn't see him in position.
Yeah, I don't have exact quotes in front of me tonight, but just from memory, right? I think Sickles, one of the lines he uses at some point is that Geary didn't occupy a position, or maybe he says a line, that they were only massed in the vicinity. And now I do think, I do think there's at least 3 key points to Meade's orders. Basically, as Meade later said they existed, was that extend the left of the Second Corps, occupy that range of hills plainly visible if practicable to occupy it. Now, again, people, I've heard, oh no, he didn't say if practicable. That's George Meade saying it, not me. That's George Meade saying it. And last but not least, take Geary's place and that sort of thing. And I think this is a good example. Whoever you think is right, wrong, or if you're in the middle or whatever, this is a good example where what could have been best served would have been by having a staff officer come out and basically saying, here, I want you to go here. I've been taking a tab, and it's interesting, if I could editorialize for a minute. My book, my Sickles book, came out in 2009 and was heralded, by people like Scott Hartwig, but I mean, John Heiser, people heralded for being fair and balanced and not trying to grind an axe against anybody. I just wanted to kind of know in my own head, what do I think happened? And it's so conflicting a lot of times, you can't tell her that. But when Kent Masterson Brown's Meade book came out, people kind of started to come back and say, a couple people, a handful of people, right? The internet, right? But a handful of people kind of started coming back and said, oh, Hessler, he's making excuses for Sickles and all that stuff. And we're not making excuses, because at the end of the day, you can take a military interpretation of this. Sickles, follow the damn orders, extend the left of the Second Corps, put your line on that hill. You can do that. I'm saying more from a management, difficult subordinate, I don't get along with this guy perspective, whatever take you want to put on it. If you realize you have a guy over here who's struggling, not getting the message, everybody would be better served by just having somebody come out and say, come here, put your guy right here, problem solved. And that didn't happen. And it's a recipe for disaster. I call this a classic failure to communicate, because we were talking about it before the show started, Darren. It's not an instance of Sickles twirling the mustache in 19th century style. I hate Meade, I'm going to destroy the army today, folks. That's not what's going on, people. And if you think that's what's going on, you're listening to the wrong show right now. Click stop and go find somebody who thinks that's what happened. I think it's a classic failure to communicate. And, it's tragic, obviously, because a lot of people lost their lives in the process. And all I wanted to do when I started my work, and I'm glad to see people of like mind here, I just wanted to kind of understand, okay, how much of this is BS? How much of this is myth? How much of this is reasonable? And I think I came down to an area in my head where it's reasonable. People may or may not disagree with that.
There's no doubt that, you can argue back and forth. And I was telling Mary this morning, we were talking, it seems like the needle on Sickles, probably thanks to your book and a lot part, Jim, is kind of going up a little bit.
A little bit.
Because I've gone back 20 years. Sickles went from this guy kidnapped the Lindbergh baby to New Coke, and then he went on and on and on. And then now he's like, something, I don't like him. I get it, but right. Exactly. And then it really comes back to what you think of Meade, right? Do you read Gelzo or do you read Masterson Brown on Meade? Kind of falls where you think about Sickles in a lot of cases, I've noticed. right?
Interesting.
And it's just what I've noticed certain people talking about it. But there's no doubt that the ground that he ultimately ended up on, he did not like. And Thomas Rafferty, Lieutenant Colonel from the 71st, the Excelsiors, he has that quote. He says, "It was quite springy and marshy with thick growth of bushes masked by woods in broken rocky grounds in our fronts, and afforded the most excellent position for the rebels to take position without risk and right." So
Oh, you're freezing.
I wasn't sure if that was me or him. So.
No, it's him. Hopefully he doesn't drop off here. But
okay. Am I back? Okay.
Yeah, you're back. Okay.
I
just start again.
Yeah, that's okay. In any case, but where that quote was, he was put in that tough spot wherever it ultimately was. And to your point, Jimmy mentioned a bit ago about Hazel Grove. I think it was more about being flanked versus being knocked off. If he started at the Peach Orchard, was asked to move back, that'd be more of a comparable to Hazel Grove. Yeah. Yeah. But I think it was more the Howard thing. But regardless, whatever position they were on, George Randolph admitted with Henry Hunt that was not a place that it was an unfavorable place for artillery. Yeah. And it was low ground,
Yeah. Sickles refers to it in some correspondence with Henry Hunt later on. It's in the Batchelder papers. I wanted to get out of my hole. That's why we often call it Sickles' hole. Now, again, I do want to be balanced here. We can get on the field and go through this interpretation, and somebody will point at that big hill, Little Round Top on our left, and say, yeah, but if you're up on that hill, you can see the enemy coming. And there's no easy answer for that. There's no account that has Sickles and his staff going up on Little Round Top and saying, well, hey, yeah, pretty good view. Let's put everybody here, kind of thing. And that's certainly a flaw in any pro Sickles argument that anybody's going to make. It's fascinating today. Everybody seems to be coming out of the woodwork saying, no, Little Round Top isn't important. It's not important. Yet Sickles made a catastrophic mistake for not positioning his troops up here. And again, it's like, wait a minute, is it important or not? And what it is important as, Little Round Top is important, if nothing else, other than obviously having a barrier to anchor your flank. But it is important as a point of observation. And I think, and I put on my amateur psychology hat in recent years, I've characterized Sickles as an emotional decision maker, and that's a real thing, folks. I got my PhD at www.google.com, just like anybody else can these days. But there's rational decision makers. George Meade, for example, might be a rational decision maker, and there's intellectual decision makers, and there's emotional decision makers, a guy like Dan Sickles. And the thing I think with emotional people is they tend to get tunnel visioned. I'm in this low ground. I got to get out of this low ground, and I got to get forward. I got to push forward. And I think part of it, you might get tunnel visioned a little bit, push forward, not so much worry about the obvious benefits of the hill on that flank, because you see Houck's Ridge in front of you, and you see Trosel's Woods and all this other stuff in front of you, and you want to push forward beyond that. And like you said, get some commanding ground where you feel your artillery will be better served, where your troops can deploy and maneuver. And it's not a great explanation, but I think it's probably as good of an explanation as any for why he didn't just go up the Little Round Top and say, well, okay, if I'm worried about getting flanked, I'll put my guys up here and we'll see the enemy coming a mile and a half away.
I think the only reference to Round Top, and again, it wasn't even called Round Top then, was Randolph saying the line extended at the base of the hill where the signal station was, which we know was on Round Top. So they were in that area.
Yeah, Bernie says in his report something to the effect of, like, it's 7 a.m. We were posted at Round Top, subject to General Sickles' orders. He says something, I forget the exact quote, but he basically says that in his report.
Mm-hmm. I think Sickles was definitely an emotional decision maker, and I think it's his past plays into that. You can see that coming into it as well. Another one that was could be a bit emotional of decision maker was also General Grant in some ways too, with some of the stuff that he did. But Meade is a very different thinker,
right,
in terms compared to Sickles. But then you also have this rivalry going on between them, which honestly, it reminds me of high school.
It does. But, Murray, you bring up a great point there, though. That's where the training comes in. The engineer which Meade is going to think of things in one way.
Yeah.
The cigar chomping politician from New York City, I got to take, I'm here to smoke cigars and kick ass, and I'm all out of cigars kind of thing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
He's going to quote unquote take action and move forward. And where again, maybe if Sickles had been more of the trained West Pointer, I don't think, frankly, that would have helped or hindered him in battlefield tactics. But a trained West Pointer might have said, well, okay, I can use this ground here, and been more of an engineer by training. And I think that might be an area where the lack of West Point might have hurt him.
And I think both ways of thinking have their place on the battlefield too.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
I mean, getting forward, not meaning to jump ahead too much, but I think, Sickles' decision does have benefits to the AOP. As much as it's a detriment to Longstreet as well, like with what he does with moving forward. So I think those two ways of thinking definitely have their place on a battlefield. And that's where I think Sickles was in some ways good as a general, that he didn't.
Well, it goes back to position. We both Sickles and Hunt had agreed that position was unfavorable, right? Not to mention, you still got Buford, who's still encamped up there at the Peach Orchard on that left flank, who needs to be relieved. So one of the things Sickles is going to have to do is move Charles Graham up there to relieve him, right? So he's going to be going up to that Peach Orchard. But again, he's still thinking, okay, I can move Graham up there because I know I'm getting support on my left at some point. And I think that was in his head the whole time. I think the clock was, his head was running. And we'll talk about the recon he does with Berdan and the third main guys here in a bit. But, I think Sickles thought all along he was going to get relieved or get supported. I think it just seems that that was the one constant I thought going as I always think about Sickles. The 6th ends up being late. They're supposed to come down the Tawny Town Road. They got to come from a different direction. That's why the 6th is going to be on the left, because they're going to come right in and just set right up. But again, if Graham's going up there, so you're looking at about 9:30 or so on July 2nd, Randolph's going to start moving some artillery around. This is when he's going to put Judson Clark's 1st New Jersey Battery B up there. He is up near the Peach Orchard. So he's kind of setting the groundwork for that move up there at that point. Because I think he realized that was going to be a big part of it.
Yeah, that's I've had that sort of posed to me before. When do you think this got into Sickles' head? How early do you think he was thinking about making this move and that sort of thing? And what we should remember too is he's got skirmishers out along the Emmitsburg Road, really from the night of the 1st, the evening of the 1st, when they get up on the battlefield. He's got skirmishers running Emmitsburg Road, Sherfy Farm, and then kind of up the road to connect with other skirmishers. We mentioned before the troops that he's left behind at Emmitsburg. Well, they're now coming onto the battlefield on the morning of the 2nd too. So I do think whether it's the troops coming up from Emmitsburg or the trains that have been left behind, that Sickles is probably, at least in the morning, still thinking about, okay, I want to do something to make sure I at least cover these guys when they came in. One of Hancock's staff officers has an interesting quote. He says something to the effect of, "It's too bad Sickles came onto the field via the Emmitsburg Road, because it caused him to overestimate the importance of it." And we can debate the efficacy of that comment or not. But I do think everything he's still got coming in from Emmitsburg, like you said, the clock is going in his head. And I think he is running plays, so to speak, all morning, to try to make sure he's got at least some coverage out towards Emmitsburg.
Yeah, and he knows that, he knows that something's going on in his front. About 10 o'clock in the morning, he's going to send Hiram Berdan out there with those 1st and 2nd U.S. sharpshooters to recon that position. He'll go out to where the amphitheater is out there, and he'll run into Cadmus Wilcox, the great Cadmus Wilcox, I call him. my favorite names ever. Back in Anderson's division. So he knows they're out there. And I think once Sickles realizes that he has troops in his front, I think the anxiety, that the pucker effect, as you like to call it, is going to start working for him. Buford is going to ultimately get relieved by Graham. He'll leave Kayla's battery behind, the ones from the first day. And he's going to try to strengthen that line. But the thing about it, though, is while this is going on, and this is what I think a lot of people want to understand, is while this is all going on, Tremaine, his aide, is beating a path back and forth to the Leicester house. He goes 5 times total from Sickles' line back to the headquarters just to try to get an idea of what's going on, to report to Meade, what's happening. Meade is going to respond basically by sending another one of his top aides, got him Edward Shriver, to kind of inspect those lines at this point, not just a third, but all of them. But, Sickles is hanging around out there trying to get clarification on what's going on.
Yeah.
He's sending his best aide back and forth. And by all accounts, whenever Tremaine goes to see Meade either is too busy for him or is focused on different things. But I think it leads to that frustration that keeps building for Sickles.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the one thing, going back to the Sickles told Meade to go to hell analogy, Sickles got 11:30 by 11:30 in the morning. Sickles himself goes to headquarters and basically requests assistance in posting the troops. So if you're going to say Sickles is just going to do whatever the hell he wants to do, he doesn't care what Meade says, he doesn't care what headquarters says, you're going to have to explain to my satisfaction, and nobody ever has. Then if that's the case, why do you go to headquarters and say, look, can you come out and help me? Can you come out and help me? And, as we know how the story goes, Meade is preoccupied. Okay, commanding gent. And again, somebody said to me one time, well, did you expect Grant to walk around the field with all of his subordinates and post troops? No. But in this case, Meade is too preoccupied. Can Warren, the chief engineer, go?
Yeah.
Preoccupied. So then finally Hunt, the chief of artillery, does go. But as I'm just saying here, if you really want to position this idea that Sickles has got this Machiavellian scheme going here to just destroy the army, and it really doesn't matter what Meade tells them, why do you go to headquarters to ask for help? Why do you go to headquarters and say, hey, come out and help me? Maybe Sickles is saying, look, I got a better idea. Can you come out here and take a look? That's very plausible. But why even go to, if you're just going to do whatever you're going to do, then why go to headquarters in the first place?
Yeah, he even asked to send Butterfield, and he gets turned down for Butterfield. I don't know what Butterfield's doing. The chief of staff. If you say, can I have Warren? No. Can I have Butterfield? No. He's like, well, can I have Hunt again? Oh, okay, I guess I'll reluctantly send you Hunt again. And so, he does. And again, Sickles, first thing he's going to ask Hunt is, do you know what this guy's planning on doing? Are we still playing D? Are we going to go offense? Hunt goes, I don't know. I have no idea what his plans are. And and the funny part about it is, you mentioned the Joint Conduct of the War Committee. He says afterwards in '64 that he was planning on attacking from the left.
He does
from the Petrie. So if that's the case, I know it's a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking, but if you're Sickles and you're saying, I don't know what's going on, you find out that he says that Meade messes Washington on the second, saying that if not attacked, I will attack. Mm-hmm. Well, that would have been good information to know. And to your point, Jim, it's not for lack of effort. He sends Tremaine back over and over again. He goes himself to find out what the deal is. Right. And you hear things about Meade, how he was sleep deprivation and all that stuff. And whatever it was, I think he was probably having too many balls in the air to deal with Sickles at that point.
Yeah, I think and that's fair.
And that's not a slight on Meade. I mean, you're in the big chair, you're the big boss. You got to worry about God knows what Howard's doing. He's probably running up and down the street at that point. Oh my God. Running from butterflies or something. But whatever it is he's got a lot going on. But Sickles, he's going to ultimately ask Hunt for permission to set that full lineup. And Hunt's like, well, I don't have the authority,
right.
So right. He's like, I can't help you out. But what we'll do is, we'll find out what the deal is. Sickles will send that second recon mission out. He'll send those third Maine guys out now under what's his name, Moses Lakeman, to go back out to those woods. And this is when they get in that skirmish with Wilcox, and about 12 to 15 guys get casualties. It goes on for about 20 minutes, half hour. But again, you're Sickles, you're not sure where you're supposed to be. And now you're getting skirmishing in your front now against a force that you think is probably going to be bigger than you really think it is. It's a matter of time. So, and it's no wonder he kept sending Tremaine back for clarification.
Yeah, and I think the what I always refer to as the firefight in Pitzer's Woods, Berdan, the Third Maine versus Billy Fixon, Wilcox's guys. It's a combination of factors. The firefight in Pitzer's Woods, which again informs Sickles and Birney and others in the Third Corps High Command that yes, those woods are occupied with Confederate enemy forces, and the enemy forces appear to be moving this way. Now, again, we know in hindsight, Wilcox is not part of Longstreet's forces, but they don't know that at the time. They see a woods full of a couple regiments of gray guys, and the firefight in Pitzer's Woods is not a minor, a couple guys popping off rounds at each other. It's a pretty spirited skirmish. So you got that going on. That would seem to reinforce, my left, my front is vulnerable. They're coming this way. You touched on a little bit about Buford's removal. Buford was supposed to be replaced at headquarters, probably by somebody from David M. Gregg's division. Pleasanton kind of screws that up. They don't get anybody over to Gregg to replace Buford until it's too late. But again, the net message is, well, great. This is how we're referring to my concerns about my front. We're removing my cavalry screen. So enemy in the woods, cavalry screen. Again, you've got the emotional play clock going in your head all morning. Headquarters isn't taking me seriously. And I do think headquarters is taking him seriously, but it doesn't matter what I think. What does Dan Sickles think? Dan Sickles thinks headquarters is not taking him seriously. And again, you put all that together and I got to act. Let's go. Move out, boys. Yep. Headquarters isn't going to solve this for me. I got to do it. I think that's what's going through his head.
And I think a big part of it, or not a big, I shouldn't say a big part of it, but part of it too, it gets back to Chancellorsville. Like, I don't want this to go how it went before. I need to make a decision, and I've got to do it now, or else this could turn out to be very, very bad. And
I don't want to be Howard again. I don't want to be that guy.
Yeah, I can't imagine, like, that's probably in everybody at like all the commanders' heads is, I don't want to be that guy right now. And Sickles recognizes like, oh, I could be in this position to do that. And Meade's got a lot going on. But of course, when Sickles does not get the answers that, when he's like, can someone come down and help me out? He's looking for something there to make sure he's, it's like, I don't want to make a mistake, but at the same time, it's like, if nobody's going to give me a direct answer, I got to take charge here.
Yeah. And that goes back to what I said at the outset, the confidence factor. Is it Sickles being overconfident, or is there a little bit lacking of confidence? And it goes back to what I said before. I think there's actually a little bit of, like you said, I don't want to make that mistake. Come on out and take a look.
Yep.
Now, again, in fairness, Hunt allegedly says, okay, if rebels are in those woods, I would not occupy this position. And Sickles kind of does the opposite. Rebels are in the woods, so he does occupy the position, which again, we know the outcome of it and all of that stuff. So there may again be a little bit of a headstrong kind of, well, I'm gonna kind of do this at this point anyways, because the ball is already opened, it's too late, and I got to take this position before the enemy does.
Yeah.
You could tell at some point he's starting to think about, because he knows he has to connect with the round tops and try to connect to the Second Corps. And he tries to, he plugs the gaps with artillery. He stretches his lines as long as he can. He makes it as far as Devil's Den with John Henry Hobart Ward. Right. But again, he knows that he's not going to be able to really fill this line. And again, I think, by 2:00 that day, the second, I think he's still expecting support to come up for him. I think he was. And I think, there's those reports that Sykes was not too keen about sending a brigade up. And, there's that rumor that, I don't believe it, but they would stop and making coffee and lighting fires and all that stuff, which I don't think is true. But I think he felt that I will send a brigade if it's absolutely necessary, but I don't want to. And I think that was the message he probably had, because he didn't seem too keen on it. And I think, as I keep mentioning, Tremaine keep going back and forth to that headquarters to find out. Eventually, Tremaine finally, he goes back and says, can you just at least give us some more artillery then? If you're not going to send us any guys. And then, Meade has that quote, generals are always expecting an attack in their front. You always want more artillery, And again, this is according to Tremaine, which is you have the phrase according to Sickles is a very common phrase, with a lot of this stuff. But again, there's reports that Tremaine felt that he was being ignored. He was getting frustrated. But Meade does send the artillery, though, and he does authorize John Caldwell from Hancock's Corps, the First Division, to go. He does authorize them if necessary to go. But I think the lack of clear orders is now you're talking maybe 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon now, and I think Sickles is still saying, guys, please have some clear orders, because he hasn't had a clear order yet, even going back to Tawnytown.
That's true.
Yeah, I think, ultimately with Meade's orders to Sickles being verbal instead of written, we'll never truly know how clear they were at the time on the ground. I mean, we just won't know that. I think, but you've raised a couple times the idea of him being supported in this position. And that, that was a contentious point for Sickles, Meade, their various supporters for the remainder of their lives. Even Division Commander Andrew Humphreys, who, if anybody does not know, Andrew Humphreys is a Meade man. Andrew Humphreys is not a Sickles man. Humphreys is a Meade man. Even Humphreys seems to imply that, I was told when I moved out here I would be supported, sort of thing. So that idea of being supported, how much support were we going to get, was a bone of contention with these guys, really for the remainder of their lives. The cynic in the audience will say, Sickles basically said, and Sickles later on, I think Sickles later on did realize that he screwed up. There's subtle moments of that. He never apologized for it, as we know. He never, but there are subtle moments where you can kind of read between the lines and say, okay, I think I see Sickles acknowledging a screw up here. When Sickles testifies before the Joint Committee on the Conduct of the War, he says, to the effect, my Third Corps held Round Top Ridge until the close of the battle. And, we know for whatever the Third Corps did or didn't do, they weren't on quote unquote Round Top Ridge. But the other thing too is Sickles would say, well, I knew when I moved forward, I knew I couldn't hold this extended position, because, it's twice as long as the position he moved out of. I knew I couldn't hold this position without more troops. And I thought Meade promised me more troops, the Second Corps, the Fifth Corps, that sort of thing. So it was a bone of contention with these guys forever. What was promised, and critically, when was it promised? Did Meade promise it early, or when Meade got out to the peach orchard and say, Jesus, the only thing I can do at this point is bring more troops out here to kind of patch up this line.
Well, he also said he thought he knew Longstreet was coming, which I don't think he did.
Right,
I don't think he could possibly know that. That's a classic 2020 hindsight. Well, I knew Longstreet was coming. That's why I moved out there. No.
Yeah, and that gets extended to, and I grabbed Longstreet and I held him by the throat and I kept the army in Gettysburg. It just gets, which is one of the things that, whether you love Sickles or hate him, it makes it interesting to watch him now kind of spin this story completely out of control as the years go by.
But 3 o'clock, they have that war council. And I think it's a war council. Not everybody realizes. They always think of the war council being the nighttime one, with a picture with Meade with the big bug eyes and the drawing there.
Where he's like glaring at somebody in the picture.
But the 3 o'clock one is the one that's interesting, because this is the one where Meade, he blows that conch shell and it says, all my corps commanders, I need you, come hither. And Sickles blows it off. He says to me, he's just too busy. I ain't coming. Yeah. And he sends an aide out to go find him and says, go tell Sickles to get over here. And this is the time where, according to Payne, we mentioned him earlier, where Meade lost his mind in anger when he found out that Sickles said he was too busy to come. And so it kind of goes, the point of that 3 p.m. war council, was this the meeting where they were going to talk about doing an offensive on the left side that Sickles presumptuously would lead, since he was there and he wasn't there to even hear about the mission, right? Is that part of it? Was that why he was so mad? And so, because if you're in the belief that he was going to go on an offensive assault from that left side, where it likely would have been, he would have probably had Sickles either leading it or one of the guys up front. And he wasn't even there to hear the meeting. So if that's the case, but whatever the case was, he tells Sickles, he sends an aide, says, tell Sickles to come here or he's fired. You're done. He sends him, this is the end of the line. You better get here. So, and this is when he tells Sickles is going to leave. He's going to tell his artillery chief to, keep an eye out for the Rebs, and that's what's going to happen. So Randolph, this is that story where Randolph will, as Sickles is going back to the headquarters, is when the cannons start. And this is
Yeah.
Randolph's cannon firing at Evander Law's Alabamans who are starting to come across the Emmitsburg Road now, right? And when Sickles, he's told not to dismount, and Meade's going to jump on Pleasant and his horse by mistake or because it's not saddled and goes riding off.
Yeah.
And really, this is good. This is going to be the first time, really, that I think anyway, that Meade gives him direct orders. When they get out there and they get there and he finds out where Sickles' position is, and there's that famous story of Sickles, what have you done? Well, I was told I could adjust my line. I told you not to march on Richmond. All those stories.
God.
But when he places Brewster and Carr along the Emmitsburg Road and says, "Here's where I want you guys to go," really, that's the first clear order he's gotten the entire day.
Well, I think I'm going to back up for a minute. I think the 3:00 conference is interesting, and I don't personally think Meade was going to elaborate on plans to attack at the 3:00 conference. We never know, but what's always been interesting in the 3:00 conference to me was how much Meade downplayed its existence later. He doesn't really mention it in his report. He doesn't really mention it in his testimony. And what he tends to say later is to the effect of, I was out inspecting the left and I found out General Sickles was out of position. Well, no, actually you had called the meeting of all the corps commanders. As you said, Sickles doesn't want to come. Warren, though, in the meantime, has gone up to check on these reports that the Third Corps is out of position and finds out that the Third Corps is in fact out of position. So that's always, that's more of my take on the 3:00 meeting. But beyond that, look, I mean, Meade gets out there, and whether you think it's Meade's first clear order to Sickles of the day, whether or not you agree with that, what is instructive is it's clearly the first time today that Meade has been on the ground on his left flank.
Mhm.
And whether you want to debate whether the orders are clear, and people can debate whether or not the orders are clear, there's no debating the fact that this is Meade's first visit to the left flank in daylight during the Battle of Gettysburg. And again, it's almost disastrous that doesn't occur until, after 3:00 in the afternoon on July 2nd, with Longstreet about to get into position, boom, with the artillery about to start, and all of that stuff going on. It has an unintended consequence of forcing Meade to take a look at the left flank, because up to that point, he doesn't think that's where the action is going to be. And whether you like Sickles or not, you agree with the move, you disagree with the move, one thing that is undeniable, Longstreet has lost any element of surprise at this point. I mean, if you're hoping for a Jackson-like surprise, pounce out of the woods kind of thing, that ain't happening, because by this point, Sickles and all of his red alerts and the recon in Pitzer's woods and all that stuff, and now Meade kind of having to come out to examine Sickles' position, all has one net effect. No more element of surprise for Longstreet.
Yeah.
The attack is about to land on the Union left. Doesn't give Meade a lot of time to prepare, because his left is not in the position he wants it to be in. And look, folks, again, I don't want people to think we're making excuses for Sickles. Offensive, defensive, whatever style of decision maker, Meade commands the army. The final decision is his. And so what this does force Meade to do, unfortunately, is not enough time to maybe prepare the defense that he might have preferred to fight in. And, the game is on.
Well, it forces obviously him to be moving people off of that line that he had. He's going to have to move Caldwell out. He's going to have to move Sykes out, the U.S. regulars, all those guys, Tilden, Spikes, all those guys. And then you have the action of the Wheatfield, the Stony, the Rosewoods. It ends up that echelon attack. What it does do, though, it delays Longstreet, right?
Well,
and that's the thing too, is he's already late because of his fun run. He has his counter march.
Mm-hmm.
So now, and they're running out of daylight. This is going on late afternoon.
Did you just call the counter march a fun run?
Fun run, yeah.
I don't think I've ever heard that one. All right.
Yeah. So he's on his fun run, right? And so he finally gets there. And so now you think about that echelon attack that's supposed to go right down the line. And now by the time you get to Ambrose Wright hitting at the angle, and reportedly he's going to get there, and Lane's gone, and Posey and Mahone aren't coming. They're out of gas at that point, and they're running late. So that hammer of Dorsey, Pender, and Rhodes, that never gets to happen. And so if you are going to look at Sickles as far as how he does impact that second day, it's maybe the timing. It's how he did maybe force Hood to swing around first instead of McLaws hitting and then Hood, right?
Yeah. So there's a lot of impacts. It definitely forces Longstreet to adjust on the fly. You can make the observation or opinion that when Longstreet carefully prepares versus adjusting on the fly, is a better offensive general. By forcing Hood to go further around to the right, it definitely stretches out the Confederate position and dilutes the impact of the attack. At the end of the day, the $1 million question with all of this is, what if Sickles stays in position? What happens? And of course, the serious historian has to caveat that they don't do what if history and all that stuff.
Right.
But I always tell people that argument doesn't matter, because you can look at what happened, and a couple things happen. As we said, whether you think Longstreet was hurt by being delayed and reaching Cemetery Ridge, or whether you think the Union was hurt by incurring more casualties, it is, in my professional opinion, an undeniable fact that Longstreet will chew up casualties fighting for Devil's Den, the Wheat Field, the Peach Orchard, and the Emmitsburg Road, which we know after the results of July 3rd ultimately become meaningless in forming and causing Robert E. Lee to win the Battle of Gettysburg. Robert E. Lee does not win the Battle of Gettysburg, and Longstreet is chewed up fighting for all of these meaningless positions. The meaningless position argument, in my mind, is incontrovertible. And I'm not talking about, because sometimes the guys get too hung up with, well, is it a defense in depth and all of that stuff, and they pull out the military textbooks and all that stuff. I'll say it again, Longstreet, heavy casualties fighting for meaningless positions that do not help Lee in winning the Battle of Gettysburg. I mean, I've said that now 3 times. So from that point of view, whether or not Sickles helped the Union cause, whether or not Sickles hurt the Union cause, Sickles's move did not cause the Union Army to lose the Battle of Gettysburg. The Union Army still wins, maybe in the nick of time, but they still win. Hood and McLaws are basically shot up in the process of it. That is the actual result of Sickles's move forward. It is. Whether or not it created more numeric casualties in the Union Army can be debated, but at the end of the day, Union Army of the Potomac's a bigger army. I hate to be cold about it, but they can afford to lose higher numbers than Hood and McLaws can.
Well, they end up having to fight 3 hours on a 26-acre wheat field, with George Rose's wheat fields. Back and forth with 5th Corps, 3rd Corps, 2nd Corps, 5th Corps again. It goes back and forth through the exactly. And they all end up where they started. And what that does result, of course, is it does create that 3rd day that Pickett's charge would not have been necessary if they were able to roll right through that. So,
well, yeah, you brought up Pickett's charge. That's been a throughput in all of my work. So when I did the Sickles book, then Wayne and I did the Pickett book, and then Britt and I did the Peach Orchard book. The importance of how the Peach Orchard and the Emmitsburg Road carries through to Pickett's charge and the 3rd day has been the throughput of all of my work, because that's exactly right. Lee captures the Peach Orchard. He captures the Emmitsburg Road. It convinces him. It encourages him to continue the assault on July 3rd. And again, we know what the outcome is of that. Not favorable to Robert E. Lee.
Yeah, it forces him to make that march. And people can debate that, whatever. It depends on who you talk to about that. But it ultimately, it's a result of the failed day. And I think you brought up a good point. Sickles may not have won it, but he didn't lose it, right?
No.
And the question, you kind of alluded to it a bit ago, is if he stayed in that position and they were able to pivot down the Emmitsburg Road and try to roll up that Union line, how is that going to play out? How would that have been any different? Because it assumes, for one, you're exposing your right flank to the entire Union line all the way down, right? How is that going to change anything anyway?
Yeah.
And so I gotta, because this is a topic I'm passionate about. Again, I often hear colleagues, professional historians say if Sickles is back on Cemetery Ridge, Longstreet blindly attacks up the Emmitsburg Road and allows his flank and his rear to be raked by a Sickles and maybe a 5th Corps and a 6th Corps who should be in position on Cemetery Ridge.
Where does it say Longstreet is going to attack up the Emmitsburg Road no matter what happens? Where does it say that? It doesn't. Robert E. Lee does not give a direct order to Longstreet that says attack up the Emmitsburg Road no matter what. Longstreet's instructions eventually are to envelop the enemy left and drive it in. I think they're looking for the enemy's left wherever it is. So that's my hot take on it.
Yeah. His job is definitely to find the Union. You have what Hood's going to try to do to try to go to Round Top. They're going to try to find that Union left and try to roll it up. Whether it be using the Emmitsburg Road as that pivot point. I'm just thinking of the plans that he ultimately, that when Lee corrects Longstreet and reports to Meade, no, this is where I want you to be. You want to do that whole thing.
Yeah.
So I think the key was where the Union Army was. But at the end of the day, when Longstreet finally made it back from his fun run there, he did not expect to see the troops right in his face like that.
Exactly.
And it did cause that delay that ultimately, and you're losing daylight. And that's the thing too.
And you're also making your troops tired.
Yeah.
Having to fight more than what they expected.
So I think when people look, to conclude all this, I think when people look at Sickles as some sort of miscreant who had I don't care what Meade says, I'm doing my thing. This is what I'm doing. It's just factually wrong. It's just wrong. Whether you look at the quotes, you look at the battle reports, you look at everything. The fact of the matter is that he tried to get clarification several times from headquarters. And for whatever reason, he wasn't getting his answers done. And I think he did what he did. I think he did in his heart, he felt was doing the right thing. I think he felt he had the leeway to do it within reason. Yeah. And then when he got up there, he realized that, he didn't have enough guys. And that was the problem. That's what got him. And it just led to his core getting wrecked in his career basically being ended and him losing his leg. But I think this concept that he's this scoundrel, I think it's just historically wrong. I do.
I totally agree. I mean, I said this earlier when I first started coming to the battlefield and you saw those interpretations. Sickles wanted to destroy the army. My favorite, Sickles wanted to be president. Somehow moving to the peach orchard is going to put you in the White House. I've never understood that one.
Well,
sort of thing.
That's what Van Buren did. So he's just following.
Yeah, right. So the what of the story is relatively well known at this point, right? We know Sickles doesn't go to Little Round Top. We know he goes to the peach orchard. We know there's heavy fighting. The what of the story, to me, the why of the story was always more interesting. And to me, the why of the story, because it's certainly open to interpretation, at the end of the day, you can't say with certainty what people were thinking or that. But I do think if you objectively look at the why of the story, why did he do it? Was it, right, wrong, or in between, or that sort of thing? If you look at the why of the story and you do it with an unbiased mind, I don't, like you said, I don't think the historical record supports the villainous, I'm going to destroy the army today kind of thing, because I hate George Meade. If you look at it objectively, the historical record doesn't support that. I could spend the rest of my life, every day I'm tagged on social media. Hey, James Hessler, somebody's criticized Sickles. You want to come in on this? And I avoid that stuff because I could spend the rest of my life doing that. My published work, which is in the public domain, is tried to be unbiased and balanced on this, but not portray Sickles as a deviant monster kind of thing. Folks, this is Dan Sickles we're talking about. It's not Adolf Hitler. It's not Genghis Khan. It's Dan Sickles, and I think there's good and there's bad and in everybody, but if nothing else, the guy sure as hell is entertaining. And I don't know half of what we would talk about at Gettysburg without him.
I would agree. And as somebody who's the general I love to study is, he kind of goes through the same thing. His historical record is not good. And I mean, I'm just kind of starting out on my journey with trying to, I don't know. I don't want to say just say that there's more to Howard than Chancellorsville, that, there's a lot to him that is very, all I hear is like, oh, he ran or he runs 11th Corps. And it's like, there's more than that to him. So I think he like Sickles and Howard seem kind of like kindred spirits in that way.
I'm glad you said that, because I forgot to mention that, because I admire the devotion that you have to Howard. Now I'm personally not a Howard enthusiast. I hate when we say fan with history. But what I admire about you and your devotion to Howard, and we always say this on our podcast, the easiest thing in the world is to say, well, I'm a Gettysburg expert. John Buford was a great general. George Meade is overlooked. Hancock was superb. Those are all cliches. The hardest part with history is taking the challenging people and trying to say, okay, they have whether it's Dan Sickles, who's just challenging from start to finish, or Howard, who has issues with his military arm, taking these challenging people and trying to unwind and unpack the story. That's the hard part, people. And so I give you a lot of respect for what you're all doing with Howard.
Thank you. Yeah, we definitely try to show him in a, just show he's not perfect. He made his mistakes, but he's more than, he goes on to the Western Theater to, he wins at Ezra Church and all that, and he's on the March to the Sea. And, doing this episode with Sickles, I saw a lot more, I'm like, wow, these two are kind of polar opposites in their personalities, but there's a lot there. And you have Howard in his memoirs, he's defending Sickles and saying, I understand. And I get it.
I'm sensing the next book here. Dan Sickles and Oliver Howard, parallel lives. We got to put Gettysburg in the title. So the parallel lives of two Gettysburg warriors.
All I can think about is the old Odd Couple TV show.
Right.
Sickles comes home
Sickles and
with
Howard.
some girl. Howard's there going, another one? Seriously, Dan? But I think it's great. But anyway, so I think we can drop it up here. I think we can go on and on all night about Sickles.
Yeah, we could, right?
He did a lot of great stuff with the battlefield afterwards, and never even mentioned Mrs. Wilmerding. So I guess there's only so much we're gonna have fun with that.
Yeah.
But suffice it to say, he is a colorful guy pre, during, and post Civil War. And what's great about history is you can study them. You don't have to like them, but you can study them and you can be fascinated by them, and you get to make your opinion and you get to make your own decision. The secret is to read as much as you can. I highly suggest reading your book. I think it's the best book ever written on him. I think it's I've read it many times, and it's a fascinating, because it's one of the few books I agree with just about everything. Because I'm like, when you talk about Sickles, we mentioned that before, it's that negative thing. I'm like, I never thought that. And I read this, I'm like, wow, it's another one. This is really, really good. I'm not the only one. So read, question what you read, and try to make up your own decisions, and go from there. So like we said, Mary, he has two legs to stand on. I knew he did.
He does. And Jim, do you have any final words?
No, I just want to say thank you again for making tonight's episode a boot Dan Sickles. I got to work on that Canadian accent. I grew up in Buffalo. A boot. I'll get it back.
Yep.
So thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, thank you very much for your time tonight and for that discussion. It was awesome, and glad we were able to talk about Uncle Dan tonight in a
so Mary, what's
I think
next?
a little bit more of a positive light than what
I think so. I hope people listen to this will sit there and say, you know what, maybe I'll just check it out. Maybe I'll read Jim's book. Maybe I'll have a little bit of an open mind. I may not like the guy, but maybe I can at least understand. Maybe there was more to it than everything I heard on on the internet.
Yeah, and let me just say, as somebody who is Team Meade, I am totally Team Sickles on what he does on July the 2nd. I do understand why, and I don't think he deserves a lot of the criticisms that he gets.
He doesn't. He does not. So Mary, what's coming up for us? What's new? What's next?
So we will be having our trivia night, our roundtable on the 23rd. So Wednesday night at 6:00 via Zoom. If you would like to sign up for that, info@civilwarbreakfastclub.com. We will be taking that weekend off from an episode, but still doing our Facebook Live. But we will be back with you the first weekend of April for our part 2 of female soldiers and spies in the Civil War. And then we will be doing an episode on Shiloh, which we are calling Shiloh 2.0.
Part 2, the search for Curly's gold.
Yeah.
We're going to have fun with Shiloh once again. So Uncle Mary says thanks again. We appreciate the fun night tonight. So Jim, again, it was a pleasure to have us with us. Hope you had a good time with this. It's always love talking to you about Sickles. And you're welcome back anytime, obviously.
Yeah, let's do it again. All of us Civil War podcasters, we're all supposed to hate each other, but it's great.
Right?
I know.
Yeah, all that stuff. But no, all joking aside, it was a lot of fun. And I'd look forward to coming back. We'll do episode 69, part 2 with Sickles.
There we go. Maybe we can we find ourselves at the mine sometime, we'll try to shake Faraz's hand and try to see who broke first,
Oh,
the first of the
God.
11. We'll try to have some fun with that. We'll try to get down into town. We'll do that soon.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah. So to all our
All right.
listeners, have a great night, and we will see you all soon. Bye, guys.
peace out, everybody.